The beauty of video games continues to blossom with each new release. A mere glimpse at the sneak previews for the Final Fantasy VII Remake, for example, is enough to make any fan weep with tears of pure Mako energy, whatever that means. I'm just reading the script. We are frequently at the mercy of breathtaking landscapes, beautiful characters, and stunning creature designs. Even stylized indie titles have the capacity to enchant and amaze with their own iconic beauty. However, not all game developers use their graphical powers for good. Instead, some opt to create grotesque designs of explicit, unsettling detail, often combining them with very disturbing backstories too. Unfortunately, these are the ones that persist in our minds, especially during dark evenings when that bundle of clothes in the corner of the bedroom starts to resemble something malicious, monstrous, and worst of all, hungry. So be warned, dear viewer, as this list contains some sickening creatures born from some particularly unpleasant lore. I'm Peter from TripleJump, and here are the 10 most disgusting video game characters. Number 10. GURDY, The Binding of Isaac. But we honestly could have chosen any of the grotesque enemies in The Binding of Isaac. This indie roguelike game, loosely inspired by the biblical tale of the same name, follows Isaac's journey through the monster-infested basement of his family home in order to avoid his mother's wrath. As proof of her faith, the mother believes that she must commit the life of her son to God, much to Isaac's heartbreak. His agony is palpable as he wrestles with the apparent hatred of his mother. His feelings of rejection and humiliation combine with the monstrous art direction to create an experience that is both intense and satisfying to experience. For this list, we had many gross enemies to choose from, but we settled with the unnerving mound of flesh, GURDY, also known as the pile. Oh, like the thing you get on your bottom. This boss is completely stationary, presumably rendered immobile by its amorphous mass. The clump of flesh and organs is punctuated only by 2 small arms, which signal her attacks, and a partially deformed face. Rumour has it that this design was originally created to look like a pile of dead children, but that was ultimately deemed too visually confusing for the player. So for a more translatable look, GURDY remained a huge heap of guts instead. Haha, lovely. Number 9. The Master, Fallout. This masterful example of ghastly design incorporated elements of biomechanical horror to establish something that is remarkably unsettling. Born Richard Moreau, and also known as Richard Grey, the Master is the hideous mind dictating the moves of the mutant army in Fallout 1. As a human, he fell into a vat of FEV, that's Forced Evolutionary Virus, during an investigation into the Mariposa military base. After stewing for almost a month, he was transformed into a formless blob which would eventually be known as the Master. If this mutant casserole sounds particularly appetizing to you, be sure to check out the delightful Barf Roll-Ups episode of Main Menu for some similarly delectable sludge. Now, the viscous entity that emerged from the vat further expanded and absorbed other creatures and humans, while also merging with the computer system within the military HQ. And soon enough, the Master had spread throughout the entire base and was beginning to collate a plan to unify the wasteland. Along with a fusion of flesh and mechanics that would make HR Giga proud, this foe also possesses a creepy array of voices. 2 male, 1 female, and 1 robotic. Let's have a listen.
Do you join the Unity, or do you die here?
Join.
Die!
Join.
Die!
His speech pattern continually cycles through the 4 different tones, each with their own personality, which makes conversing with this collective monstrosity even more unsettling. Thankfully, if you can't quite bear the thought of going face to hideous face with the Master during the final confrontation, the player can opt to snipe him from a nearby window, or simply lob all their pulse grenades without enduring the retaliation of his Gatling lasers. Haha, it's super effective against blob types. Number 8. The Bloater, The Last of Us. As if the early stages of the cordyceps brain infection weren't gross enough, the fourth level of development is both disgusting and very dangerous. From their appearances to their sounds and mannerisms, most of the foes in this game are utterly horrible. However, they coalesce rather perfectly in the design of the bloaters. Similarly to that of the clickers, the skull blossoms into a fungal explosion of infected tissue, but now the misshapen lumpy body is also plastered with shroomy clumps. Taking years to reach this stage, the mutation of these enemies caused the thick cordyceps coating to spread over the hulking form, essentially manifesting as protective armor. Oh no! Because of this, the bloater is a particularly tough opponent, often withstanding multiple hits from your shotgun and hunting rifle. And these are angry mushroom boys too, so don't expect them to go easy on poor old Joel. Bloaters are particularly aggressive, a fact which players may have noticed when they were insta-killed upon being grabbed by the nasty brutes time and time again. If ripping a survivor's jaw apart wasn't sickening enough, these enemies hurl sacks of mycotoxin that explode on impact. This putrid substance will damage the player over time, slowly sapping at their health while they desperately avoid the bloater's charge attacks. Angry, tough, and exceptionally ugly, this boy is practically perfect in every way. I'm going to be sick. Number 7, Marguerite Baker, Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. Before suffering under the influence of Evelyn's gift, Marguerite was known to be a caring and loving housewife. During the early stages of infection, this kind and dutiful mother tried to seek treatment upon discovering the mold growth inside her brain. But the telepathic manipulation took hold of her mind and warped her into a psychotic and unstable fanatic. As well as becoming your standard mutated cannibalistic member of the Baker family, Marguerite also gained the ability to birth and control hideous molded insects. Additionally, her superhuman strength and speed allow her to scuttle along the walls and ceilings, which proves to be incredibly sickening during her final confrontation with Ethan in the greenhouse. Throughout this stage, her limbs elongate and her stomach swells with swarming bugs. The trypophobia nightmare that is the hive in her abdomen discharges creepy crawlies during the battle, but can also be targeted to inflict extra damage if you can manage to keep your aim steady when looking at the bubbling monstrosity. Her body moves oddly and rapidly, often giving Ethan a shocking view of the infected swarm between her insectile legs. As her disgusting offspring burst forth, the player is forced to fight against both mother and children while trying not to get overwhelmed by the sheer amount of limbs and eyes on display. Now, I like to think of myself as a pretty inclusive guy, but I think even I would struggle to call this vagina beautiful. Number 6, Cerberus, Dante's Inferno. This repulsive beast can be found guarding the entrance to the third circle of hell, barring Dante's way with its trio of repulsive maws. Unfortunately, this pup, if you can call it that, deals triple the amount of potential nausea with its revolting design. This beast, draped in noble cloths, has human hands and worm-like heads. The flesh transitions from an unpleasant pallor to something far more raw and bloody, and its teeth appear decayed and rotting. And as if 3 giant putrid mouths weren't enough, the creature's eyes have been replaced with yet more snapping chops. As we are far more accustomed to the traditional portrayals of Cerberus, simply a single giant doggo with a 200% head bonus, this design is particularly unnerving in its deviation from the norm. It barely resembles a dog at all, instead combining strange elements of human and mollusk physiology. In order to progress through the circle of gluttony, Dante is forced to mercilessly slay the creature, lopping off 2 heads with his scythe before finishing off the remaining one with his cross, and not a moment too soon. This is definitely one pupper that we will never be including in any cutest video game dogs list. Number 5, Abstract Daddy, Silent Hill 2. Also known as Ideal Father, this Silent Hill 2 creature is a manifestation of Angela's childhood trauma, with the horrific form referencing the awful abuse she suffered at the hands of her parent and brother. Interestingly, both its appearance and its symbolism mirror the surrealist work of André Masson, specifically his piece entitled The Pianator, which may have been an inspiration for its horrific motif. Not only is this design unnerving and revolting on its own, but the adjoining backstory adds another gruesome layer to the creature's concept. In appearance, the abstract daddy looks to be formed of two bodies intertwined beneath a sheet of fetid flesh. The nature of this form is definitely perverse, which reflects the horrendous details of Angela's childhood experiences. Dangling limbs hang along the bottom of this conceptual bed frame structure, and two distorted mouths can be identified among the putrid tissue. If we look closer, it's evident that the lower form of the creature writhes and screams in anguish, no prizes for guessing why, and it's perhaps even more horrifying to note that during this battle, Angela suffers great torment at the mere sight of the abominable creature. Continuing the horrific metaphor, the room itself, with aggressive pistons thrusting through the fleshy walls, is uncomfortably reminiscent of a defiled uterus, considering the context. So sure, while there may be other more overtly monstrous creatures in the Silent Hill franchise, it's the meaning behind the symbolism of the abstract daddy that contributes to a sense of utter inescapable terror and sets it apart as something truly revolting. Number 4. Dr. William Birkin, Resident Evil 2. You may remember William as the virologist who worked as head of the Golgotha virus research project, or you may recall that he is the father of Sherry Birkin and husband of Annette Birkin, but most probably you'll know him as the lumbering hulk of flesh, teeth, and rage that pursues Leon and Claire during Resident Evil 2. After a particularly messy confrontation with Alpha Team on the night of September 22nd, 1998, William was gunned down. The team seized T and G virus samples and fled through the sewers, intent on reaching the extraction point. However, before succumbing to his wounds, Birkin injected himself with a remaining G sample. Unfortunately, the virus was unable to effectively stabilize his body, thereby transforming him into a grotesque creature of several different forms, each more disgusting than the last. William undergoes a total of 5 stages of transformation, ultimately culminating in the shapeless mass of fangs and tentacles that tries to devour the Alexei 5000 train, but he starts pretty revolting from the get-go, to be honest. During stage 1, the left side of Birkin's body ruptures outwards, his flesh breaching to reveal a huge, twitching, bloodshot eye that will persist through each subsequent form. During the following phases, he develops claws and additional limbs, progressively losing any resemblance to his human form. The 4th level of transformation produces a hexapedal creature, complete with a gnashing spiky maw and another bulging eye atop its other shoulder, and by this stage, Birkin is lost completely. But truly the most stomach-turning thing we had to deal with in this game, and up there with some of the grossest creatures in the franchise, was Birkin's final form. The noises alone are abominable, but god, just looking at this thing puts me right off that out-of-date ham and squid sandwich I was really looking forward to having for lunch. Thanks, Will! Number 3. Dead Hand, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. In my opinion, anything that skulks or lurks can't be good, and Dead Hand is one such creature. It hides in the earth, eagerly waiting to snatch any passing elf boy or girl with its numerous monstrous hands. The hunched beast is covered in dark splotches that resemble seeping blood beneath what must be either pale corpse-like skin or bandages in dire need of redressing. The lifeless eyes are enough to make any pointy-eared adventurer flee in abject terror, but it's that horrible neck-wobbling walk that will truly evoke dread in the player. We may have expected such a creature in some of the other darker Zelda games, such as Twilight Twilight Princess or Majora's Mask, but its left-field inclusion in Ocarina of Time makes it even more unnerving, as does the fact that its German name, Brain Feeder, evokes a zombie vibe that I've not really noticed before and really wish I hadn't now, to be honest. And where can we find this loathsome creature of nightmare? Oh yes, the bottom of the well. Yeah, that's a blood-soaked red flag for sure. Not only that, but let's not forget that Link is a child here. That's right, a kid descends into the darkened well, tiny dagger in one hand and dwindling hope in the other, only to be faced by a blob of tumorous hungry flesh and flailing limbs. This design clearly speaks to the player's childhood fears of monsters grabbing their exposed feet at bedtime. And when I say childhood fears, I definitely do not mean that I'm still genuinely scared of one of these hands grabbing at me when I get up in the night to pee. The fact that I leave the light on at bedtime is purely incidental. Number 2, the one reborn, Bloodborne. How could we do a list like this without including some macabre entity from the Soulsborne mythos? For this entry, we've chosen the glorious One Reborn, a mighty undead mass of limbs and tissue that makes the Witch of Hemwick look like Bayonetta in comparison. This unholy boss was born, bloodborne you might say, from a Pthumerian ritual that combined the bodies of Yharnam's inhabitants. Less a human centipede and more of a human amalgamate, this creature possesses a large humanoid torso attached to the undulating mass of rotting corpses that make up the rest of its body. The limbs seem to move with their own independence, suggesting that the individual bodies are somewhat alive, albeit in a zombified state. The player can encounter this horrible beast in the Advent Plaza, specifically in a chapel-like building that adds ironic credence to its ungodly origins. It appears through a portal manifested by the pale blood moon, evoking the imagery of birth as it falls into the arena. Overall, the One Reborn has simple mechanics, but hits very hard, especially with its AoE attacks and putrid vomit. But don't be surprised during the battle to witness decaying corpses raining down from above, because that's exactly what this situation needs. More bodies. One thing's for sure, if the brave hunters facing this beast don't lose their heads, they will most certainly lose their lunch. And number 1, the Broodmother, Dragon Age Origins. As with some of the other entries in this list, the dreadfulness of the Broodmother is further enhanced by her disturbing background lore. Dragon Age Origins tells us that the Darkspawn Horde have been known to abduct human women following battles or raids on the surface. Although the details of the resulting process is somewhat debated, Hespeth informs the player that the women undergo hellish torture during the first stages of their mutation into Darkspawn. After this, they are forced to consume the flesh of other ghouls. Consequently, after days of heinous treatment, their transformation into their new hellish form is almost complete. It is heavily implied that the women endure absolute horrors and violations during this process, which makes this enemy design far more unsettling. These creatures are victims, twisted by unspeakable abuse, eventually forced to birth the next generation of demonic creatures. In regards to appearance, broodmothers are heavily mutated, bearing little likeness to the human women they once were, hulking, immobile, and in possession of many disgusting, writhing tentacles. With their minds and bodies broken and twisted into this repulsive state, all their humanity is lost, only to be replaced with the unrelenting need to devour and reproduce. Upon birthing a large litter, the broodmother proudly becomes parent to a range of different spawn, including shrieks, hurlocks, and ogres. These bouncing babes, also equally horrific, often leave the womb with the ability to walk, and will mature rapidly within a few weeks. But that is a list for another time, featuring all your suggestions for more disgusting video game creatures, which you can let us know about in the comments below. You can follow myself and TripleJump on Twitter here, and if you want to support the things you enjoy, then check out the rewards on our Patreon. Finally, don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. I've been Peter from TripleJump, and thanks for watching.